The digital transformation is on its steepest curve to date, but demand for talent far exceeds supply. And when it does exist, it's often in the wrong place. And that's an immigration issue. We're here at the annual gathering in Davos to collect insights and ideas from CEOs from around the world. And today I'm joined by Hiba Anver, partner at Erickson Immigration Group, specialists in supporting the hiring and relocating of high-level talent worldwide. Hiba, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, tell us all about Erickson, what you do, and why immigration is such an important issue.
So I think the best way to understand what Erickson Immigration Group does as a law firm is to first talk about why immigration is such an important issue. And what I can say is that immigration policy is effectively economic policy. And in an increasingly global economy, you have to talk about what it is that drives a global economy. And in order to talk about what drives a global economy, you have to talk about innovation. And we're here in Davos during the World Economic Forum, and everybody's very much focused on the global economy as well as technological innovation. But I think it's important to remember that it's humans, it's the people that drive the innovation that drives the global economy. And so if a company can hire the most qualified person from anywhere in the world, regardless of where they are in the world, then that company is going to innovate more, it's going to have more commercial success, and it's going to end up going on to becoming a global economic player. And so that's where Erickson Immigration Group comes in. We are a global immigration law firm, and we represent some of the largest and most successful multinational companies on the planet. And we help them by taking care of the immigration requirements when they want to be able to hire the best and brightest from around the world. And it's through the work that we do that we can say definitively that humans have played a very critical role in terms of the innovation that has led to companies becoming key players in a global economy.
And so this link between immigration and growth and prosperity, from a business perspective, what's the data telling us?
So the data actually shows us time and time again that high-skilled immigration is actually a powerful driver of both economic performance as well as global competitiveness, as well as business competitiveness. So essentially what the data shows us is that when it comes to high-skilled immigration, these foreign workers are not just participants in a economy, like they're not necessarily just participating in the local labor market. They're going on to, create companies, they're founding startups, and these companies go on and literally define global markets, right? And I can give you two examples from the US. In 2022, more than half of the startups that were valued at $1 billion or more were, the result of at least one immigrant founder. And then in 2024, 46% of Fortune 500 companies had at least either one immigrant founder or a child of immigrants was one of the founders. And so I think what the data basically demonstrates is that when it comes to high-skilled immigration, there is a profound advantage to both companies as well as countries if they're able to open up their marketplace to the free exchange of ideas that high-skilled immigrants bring when they choose to work in a particular location. The challenge is that if the high-skilled talent doesn't necessarily see a clear pathway to settling in a country and having a long-term career, then that talent will choose another location and take their skills with them.
So all these people gathering in Davos every year to talk about the technological advances and about artificial intelligence and all the other things that they, to put it bluntly, are obsessed by. Do you think immigration is falling aside? Do you think that's a conversation people should be having more?
I certainly think that it's a conversation that people should be having more of, and I think that the immigration topic should actually be central to the technology conversation as it is to many political conversations. Because at the end of the day, this sort of innovation, particularly the type of innovation that's being discussed here in Davos, it relies on more than one thing. It relies on the technological infrastructure, obviously, but it also relies on human capital. And what I mean when I say human capital, it's the engineers, the scientists, the highly skilled STEM employees that go on to innovate and create and imagine the technologies that have really been the basis of some of the most powerful AI companies in the world, many of whom are here, many of which are being discussed today. And so I think for that reason, it really needs to be more of a central topic.
So is the phrase kind of homegrown talent just becoming something from the past?
It's definitely not the only consideration, and we've actually learned this through the type of work that we do. If a company is unable to source the talent that it needs, it's going to look elsewhere, and companies have chosen to, take steps such as establishing presence in other countries or switching to more of a decentralized, team or employment structure. And part of what we do at our firm is help them work through the immigration side of a lot of these strategies. So we've actually had a front row seat to these sorts of trends. The companies are going to go where the talent is, and if they're not able to bring them into the US, into Switzerland, for example, or into wherever the company is based, then they're going to try to find a workaround because there's no margin right now to slow down in terms of this race to innovate, especially with the conversation surrounding AI.
And in terms of policy, are governments on top of these trends?
So it's interesting. There are countries that have taken a number of really interesting steps in order to incentivize the high skilled talent to choose their country as opposed to other countries. So, for example, there are certain countries, such as the US, where I'm from, or even Switzerland, where we are, that have certain immigration pathways that are actually reserved specifically for foreign employees that specialize in STEM occupations, technology, engineering, that sort of a thing. There are other countries that have, a very well-known program such as Digital Nomad, which essentially allows a tech employee to come to their country and live and work without necessarily having a role in that specific country. And countries that have, the Digital Nomad program include the UAE, for example, Spain, Portugal. There are certain companies like the UK, like Saudi Arabia, like Singapore, who have immigration pathways specifically for individuals who are founders of startups because they're trying to incentivize the talent not just to come and work in their particular country, but to come and specifically innovate and create companies in that country. But the thing that I actually find the most fascinating out of all of this is what certain countries do in response to other countries that are taking steps to restrict immigration. And I'll give you an example of that. So, for example, in the US recently implemented a new $100,000 fee for the H-1B visa. And the H-1B visa is probably the most frequently leveraged employment-based visa in the United States. In response, China released something known as the K visa, which is designed specifically to attract foreign talent in science and engineering and technology. In other words, it's designed to attract the same talent that would have worked in the US had it not been for the $100,000 fee. And these sorts of responses, to me at least, are clearly signal that companies and nations understand that it's not just about necessarily filling labor gaps, it's about competing for talent and for ideas that are going to make that country successful and remain on the forefront of tech innovation.
You mentioned STEM skills a couple of times. I mean, are they crucial? Is that an issue around the world?
It is an issue because there are several countries around the world that are actually experiencing labor shortages when it comes to employees that have STEM skill specializations. And that's why it's becoming an issue because it's not to say that there's not sufficient talent in that local labor market. The issue is that simply relying on local labor markets alone may not be enough because of the pace at which innovation is happening. And so, in order for a high skilled migrant, a high skilled employee to choose a particular country, what that individual wants to see is essentially a predictable, stable, viable pathway to a long-term career. And countries that understand that and implement immigration policy to support incentivizing high skilled talent to choose work in their countries will be the countries that eventually remain on the forefront of technological innovation.
Well, that was fascinating. Huber, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
In the end, the global economy, no matter how high tech, is driven by people. And a generation of global expertise is on the move. Thinkers and innovators transporting themselves to where they're needed most. Immigration is economics. It shapes where talent flows, how industries evolve, and which nation states lead the latest wave. And that's the world being shaped by companies like Erickson.